All right, good morning. I see some people starting to trickle in here. So thank you for joining us. We will get started here shortly in about 5 minutes at 10 o'clock. We'll just give a little bit more time for a few more to join in. So sit tight. And if you haven't already, maybe get familiar with the Q&A box, say hi, do a little shout out, maybe try if you have any questions using the Q&A, and maybe grab a notebook, pens, coffee, tea, anything else you may need to get comfortable and cozy, and we'll see you at 10 o'clock. All right, everyone, welcome. We're so happy you're here. It is 10 o'clock. And this is our 8th class, the second Wednesday of September, our final class on Firewise landscaping for the summer. My name is Lauren, and I am the Water Conservation Specialist here at Big Bear Lake Department of Water. And I'm enjoying co-hosting this first summer series of WaterWise webinars, Water and Fire and Plants Oh My, along with Sierra Orr, our Public Information and Conservation Supervisor. Sierra, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody.
So today we will be featuring our guest speaker and fire landscaping expert, Douglas Kent. And he's here to present his third and final class on managing wild vegetation. Douglas is a firescaping expert, former landscape contractor, educator at Cal Poly and other landscape training and seminars, and an author of 8 books and countless articles featured in LA Times, Coastkeeper Magazine, Pacific Sun, and Fine Gardening, to name a few. There we go. So today is our 8th session in our webinar series and our final class with Douglas. Throughout the summer webinar series, Douglas has taught us about the essentials of protection in Firewise landscaping and the art of defensible space. Last week, we learned about creating habitat and enhancing pollinators with orchid black. And our very last class will feature Laura Allen on how to save trees during a drought. So if you missed the first 2 months of our webinars, we still encourage you to join us for our final classes this month. And these are sure to inspire and engage. Each class is different and will offer something new for you to learn and incorporate in and around your home here at Big Bear. Recordings will be available to those that register, and they are also uploaded on our YouTube channel titled Big Bear Water. So just a reminder, attend live for each class if you can. You may have a chance to win free gifts and books if you are a DWP customer. These sessions are targeted for all Big Bear Valley residents, as well as business and property owners here. If you would like to sign up for our last session, please email conservation@bblDWP.com. We also post the registration links on our Facebook page, so be sure to follow us there and give us a like. Last but not least, we do want to make sure this is an interactive session, so please feel free to utilize the Q&A and chat at any point. If questions are answered live, we will note that. And if they don't get answered during Douglas's presentation, we'll make sure to answer your questions at the end. During the Q&A session, if you prefer to speak, raise your hand and we should be able to unmute you at that time. And remember, we do offer a variety of water conservation and efficiency rebates to our customers. If you're interested in upgrading your irrigation system sprinklers or controllers, or want to start collecting rain with one of our free or rebated rain barrels, check out our website and send us an email. Our native plant program is also ongoing and fall is a perfect time to plant. Each account is eligible for up to 10 plants and up to $100 off their purchases. Our shopping list and further information is available on our website. We have also recently expanded this offering to include shopping online or other nurseries outside of Big Bear, but you do need to be careful that the plant species match the exact species on the list. So if you have any questions while you're out there, I'm happy to take a call and help you with that. So with that, let's get to managing wild vegetation. I am going to turn it over to Douglas. Here we go.
All right. Good morning, everybody. And Lauren, thank you very much. Rousing introduction. Let me start sharing my screen. And while this is coming up, just say thank you for showing up. You know, showing up is just the absolute essential, critical part of creating fire resilient communities, sustainable communities, economically viable community. It just involves a lot of people showing up and caring, and you guys are doing it today. And so I really want to acknowledge your unique personality and your courage and your willingness to learn, to take time out of your day and grow your mind and your perspective. So thank you very much. You're a unique individual and I appreciate you. All right, let's get started. This is a fun one. This is a really wordy one. If you were here last week, that just flew by, but I don't think that's going to happen today. So I'm just going to recap what we've already covered. So 2 months ago, we covered the bare essentials. And if you're going to watch any of these fire escaping presentations, I would really encourage you to watch that one because that is the essentials. Emergency access, the vital role that structures play in protection, small properties and the challenges with those, and then just the core of defensible space, 30 feet out from a structure. The week following, we really took a deep dive into defensible space. So we looked at ways, fences and outbuildings, overhangs and decks. We looked at trees and tree spacing and how important that is, and then the role of plants in fire protection, with the ultimate conclusion being that the condition of the plant far outweighs the type of plant. So maintenance rules in fire country. And then today, we're going to be covering zones 2 and 3. So that's 31 feet out from a structure, all the way to 100 feet to 200 feet or your property line. And I'll be just looking at the goals, some of the big liabilities in those zones, which are fuel tanks and RVs, using equipment like weed whackers and mowers in fire country, the avenues to handle a fairly large hurdle in communities as wooded as yours. Working with nature, some of the techniques that we can reduce the impact on our wildlife. And then the reasons for low compliance. California has dismally low rates of compliance with state fire code, and there's some really good reasons for that. And how do we overcome those? And then conclusion, where is this ultimately leading? Where are we taking Big Bear into the 22nd century? So, okay, let's get going. So zones 2 and zones 3. The landscape around your house is surrounded by 3 zones. Zone 1 is defensible space, 0 from 30 feet out. And the goal of this zone is to endure and protect. So they can absorb all those firebrands that are being driven by that wind and they can get pummeled without igniting. That is the core goal with that zone, is to endure and to protect. Now zone 2 from 31 feet out to 70 feet, that's where the fire is actively stopped. So Big Bear would have to have 2 fires stopped there. You would have to have the canopy fire stopped and then the ground fire stopped. And that's all going to occur in zone 2. And then zone 3, 71 feet out to your property line, is all about reducing the severity of the fire while latently protecting the ecological health of your beautiful community. So maintenance is essential. And the maintenance priorities in zone 1 and zone 2 and zone 3 are evacuation access, being able to navigate your property in times of distress and emergency. The roads, I'll give a real brief example of that, fuel tanks, RVs, and then the actual maintenance tasks for managing that outline areas. So very first thing when you're getting started in zone 2 and 3 is just evaluate your access. Can you flee in any direction? Because sometimes your road may be cut off. And can firefighters actively navigate your property? And so pathways are the first place to start. So prune overhead vegetation so it's at least 10 feet up from the pathway so you can carry ladders and equipment. Remove all the flammable vegetation, just 3 feet on either side. So you're just mowing along that pathway, that's all. Remove the vegetation or any tripping hazard into the pathway, very easy to see, and that's a quick fix. Fill gaps or cracks in your pathway. Sometimes that's nothing more than just grading or regrading a pathway. Repair, tighten, and paint all handrails, which are really important. Fix outdoor lightings. Firefighters don't take the night off, and many of our fires are fought at night, and ferocious fires because of the pressure differentials when winds kick up at night. So some of the most dangerous work is actually done during night, and having night lighting and allowing those emergency personnel to move about your property is essential. And then just maintain non-skid treatments. And this was really important when I worked up in Northern California, the northern coast, where the north and east sides of the structures, where they were perpetually moist, were just slick and it was easy to slide. Maintaining non-skid treatments. Now, roads, I just cannot stress roads enough. And this would fall into usually zone 2 or zone 3. And I'm just going to give a quick story about this. I was doing some training in Malibu, and I was on the street where Barbara Streisand lived and all these other stars, and it was Richie galore. And I'd shown up to this training about an hour early just to drive around the roads and do my own little assessment. The roads were rated as poor to barely okay. They had overhanging flammable branches, no clearance on the shoulders, no off-street parking. The roads were really narrow with poor forward visibility. And so when we were doing training, two of the neighbors had come out and started complaining bitterly to us that the firefighters hadn't come to their street. And as a consequence, they lost 3 of the mega mansions on their street, and they were pissed off. They felt that they deserved that protection. The problem is, though, that Malibu was overrun by the Wolseley fire, and their resources were stretched thin. There was no way a fire captain would send an engine down a road with a poor chance of success. That was not a street where you could actually take a stand and put a big dent in that fire. They had created conditions with firefighters, and they took no responsibility for that. We can change that. You have control of the road in front of your house. You can improve the ability of firefighters to move in and people to evacuate. So the very first thing, absolute very first thing, is remove those flammable fuels at least 3 to 5 feet. State law calls for 5 feet of clearance on the shoulders of the road, so the vehicles themselves don't start that fire. Prune those trees at least 15 feet above the road so large trucks can swiftly navigate. Fire hydrant should be visible 150 feet in advance. That means 3 to 5 feet of low vegetation on a brightly painted fire hydrant. This is important, and you can influence this if you have a fire hydrant in front of your property. And then check forward visibility. If you want a firefighter to move at 25 miles an hour, they're going to need 155 feet of forward visibility. So just drive down your neighborhood really quick and check forward visibility and your driving speeds, which ultimately has an outcome on how many homes are destroyed or how fast that fire can move. Guide markers, hillside rural communities that have serpentine roads have guide markers to help people up at night. They're reflective tape on markers and make sure that those are visible to help the emergency personnel. Rural driving surfaces. I do a lot of work in the Sierras, Grass Valley and Auburn, and there's a lot of privately maintained roads that are gravel, and these roads need treatment once a year. So that's hauling in gravel and getting a grader in there to really keep that road navigable. And then fire-resistant plants, especially in zone 2. These are the durable natives that need little water, but are so fire resistant that they may produce a flame, but they quickly extinguish it. These are the type of plants that we want in zone 2. And then protect power lines. Did you know communities in California are now regulating that you can't plant a tall tree under a power line? It seems like a no-brainer, but I guess we actually had to make a law because people just weren't putting the two together: tall trees, power lines, fire. So protect your power lines. A lot of the power lines in rural communities are run overhead. Only rich communities have running underground. And so everybody needs to pay attention to what our vegetation is doing to those power lines. And then fuel tanks. By law, propane, LPG, natural gas tanks have to be 50 feet away from a structure. They should have 30 feet of mowed vegetation around them, with 5 feet of non-combustible immediately around them. So that would be gravel, or you would be doing some kind of treatment where it took no vegetation, you take it right down to the earth, to the mineral, 5 feet around it. And importantly, these areas should not and cannot legally be used as storage, which is really common in rural areas. You will find all kinds of stuff laying up against propane tanks. Whether it's tools or excess stuff, it's crazy. And I've been on fires where you hear these go off, and it's a bomb. It's just a massive explosion that sends a column of fire and smoke straight up. And so they really need the attention and care. They are a big liability. One of the other big liabilities is RVs. RVs are really dicey, and they were a big deal up in the campfire. And what it is a lot of people use them as second homes or guest homes on rural lots. And as a consequence, they don't move a lot, and debris gets caught underneath them, and they get caught. Debris gets caught in those fabric awnings on the very top. And as they age, like anything, they kind of sag and warp, which is kind of what I'm going through right now, sagging and warping. And when they warp, the cubby holes on the outside start bending open, allowing access for those firebrands to get in there. So they just need basic care. First and foremost, get underneath it and clean out that ignitable debris. That is, once those things get going, they're nearly impossible to put out. So remove that flammable debris, mow vegetation at least 20 feet around them so there's no direct flame contact on those structures. Replace weatherization. So as the RV sags and twists, at least the weatherization will stop those firebrands from penetrating the RV. And then repair and replace any outside openings such as cubby doors. So we see this a lot in rural areas where these are a big liability. And then landscape zones 2 and 3, maintenance rules. I cannot stress this enough. We are fire in our rural urban areas where we have community assets, where we have public property, maintenance rules. Maintenance replaces fire, and we create fire protected properties and communities through maintenance. And the rule is a little at a time, all the time. So there's never this huge traumatic event in the community that would disrupt an ecosystem. So landscape maintenance is fairly straightforward. And this is well-documented information, but remove the dead, dying, and diseased vegetation. This is kindling. This is how fire spread is. So remove that first, whether it's up in the trees or in the shrubs or down below, remove that fine fuels. And then really pay attention to your propane tanks and your RVs and get those cleared, because if they go, they will really cause a fire to rapidly expand. Cut all non-irrigated land cover to 6 inches. This is a state law within the first 100 feet. So if you're not actively maintaining a garden out there and it's simply just wild vegetation within 100 feet of a structure, it's legally got to get knocked down to 6 inches. Sweep up leaves and debris, especially near any kind of structure, and then irrigate zone 2, maybe, right? Once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, depending on what you have, but just enough to maintain leaf moisture so the plant itself isn't ignitable. And then remove flammable material and combustible ground covers from around the drip line of trees. So we're just trying to avoid the ground fire from turning into a canopy fire, where it goes across and then comes up. So we're just removing that flammable material around the drip time trees. I'd like to point out too, this is in lieu of limbing up trees. Limbing up is where we take the lower branches and remove them 10 feet or 15 feet off the ground so the flames can't get into the canopy. As a practice, it is a terrible horticultural thing to do. In fact, it rivals horticulture rather than horticulture, because what happens when you remove the lower limbs of a tree, the girth of the trunk actually stops growing as strongly, but instead it uses that energy to shoot skyward, and it creates a kite that's more likely to either topple over or snap in high winds. So it creates a structurally weak tree is limbing up. So instead of limbing up, we're just going to clear around the drip line of the tree. Isolate shrubs by tooth and 3-time bite. I covered this in detail last month in session number 2. And then prevent ground covers and vines from scrambling up fences, shade structures, trees, utility poles. We see all kinds of stuff, right? Ivy, honeysuckle, poison oak, bramble, blackberry will all get caught up in power lines and trees. We need to pull that ignitable material down from those assets and possible fuels. And then lastly, if you've got the time, if you've handled the fuels, then really start auditing the water systems on your property. So you're looking at the irrigation system and you're making sure it's properly spraying, you're not wasting water. And you're looking at the stormwater systems to make sure that the water that's falling off your driveway and your roof is getting channeled properly so it doesn't cause an erosion or topsoil loss. Working with equipment. I work on 16 acres at Cal Poly Pomona, and we do a lot of equipment training with our staff and our students, and for good reason. We are in a highly ignitable area, and the #1 cause of wildfires starting in California is the use of equipment. So it is can be a really dangerous endeavor. So that would be mowers, weed whackers, chainsaws, anything that friction, heat, and sparks need proper attention. So the very first thing is put spark arresters on exhaust ports. What happens in exhaust ports is you get this accumulation of material inside of it, and sometimes it just burps us out in the form of sparks as particulates on fire. And that spark arrestor can catch those before they ignite something in the environment. Check up for the buildup for the carbon in the exhaust ports. So clean those out so those sparks are less likely. Refuel only when that engine is cool, and always refuel on a board or something that's non-flammable forever. Now, this is common. Never ever lay a hot machine on dry grass. It's so I've seen our students do it loads of time. They just get so exhausted and tired, and they just set it down, and you really have to hold it until you can get it to a board or someplace that isn't so ignitable. Always bring a fire extinguisher with you. So keep it within 30 feet of you, 40 feet of you. So if you're mowing, you're just going to have to walk back, pick it up, and walk it up with you as you move through the landscape. But you really want to have that on hand anytime there's fire weather. So that's high temperatures, low humidity, and wind. You really want to avoid any kind of equipment use after 10 a.m. Probability just goes up because that's when we start kicking up. 10 p.m., 10 a.m. winds start building. And then avoid work, any kind of work during extreme fire weather. So, and not mentioned, but I do have, this is the Lyle Center where I work, and here we have the non-spill gasoline can. So if we tilt it upside down, nothing will come out until we press that nozzle down. So, and it's cheap. Anybody can get one of those. All right, managing wild vegetation. So reducing the amount of fuels in a landscape where public health and well-being are the top priority is vital for neighborhood protection. And these are the methods that you can use to control wild vegetation. And there's 2 slides on this. There's a lot of methods. So you can use controlled burns, which controlled burns are fantastic for landscape health and for native integrity. But they really are beneficial on hundreds, if not thousands of acres. And they can be political suicide in some communities. It just, you say you're going to do a controlled burn and it's like it's going to go to court and you're going to have people against it and for it. And it turns into this big thing that nothing ever happens. I would like to point out, though, that you can rent flamers. Now, a flamer is just what Caltrans would use on their roadways to control weeds. They just use flames that go right along those impervious, non-flammable surfaces and just evaporates the weeds. Super effective, ecologically sensible, economically sensible, but you'd really only want to use a flamer on non-flammable surfaces. So you have a lot of weeds coming in cracks, roads, sidewalks. Driveways would be a perfect place for flamers. And you'd really only want to use them spring to early summer because you're not burning the plant, you're boiling it from the inside out. So you kind of want a wet plant to work with when you use flaming on a private property. But I've used it to great effect. Sierra may have some comments on that about the legality of using flamers. Chopping and mowing, that's really just weed whackers. I mean, that's the number one thing. They do have brush mowers where you just, you just run it up. And this is by far the most common way. It leaves the fuel on site, but it does put it down to the ground and allows it to decompose faster. But this is only good for material that's really about less than ½ an inch in diameter. So this is the finer material, the grasses, the bulbs. Cutting. So we chainsaws, pruners, saws. This is labor intense. You're really getting right up into the plant and mowing it this way. So this would be great if you were in managing a lot of lemonade berry or toyon or manzanita is how we'd handle this type of treatment, is through cutting. Digging is where you're just going in there and removing the plant. It's by far the best type of remediation for some of our most aggressive non-natives, which would be like eucalyptus and acacia, because both are resprouting trees. And then grazing. The city of loves its goats, and there's a lot of good reasons. You can graze with cattle, goats, or sheep, or even llamas, and they eat the grasses, the forbs, and some woody ground covers. So really, cattle and sheep eat the grasses and the forbs, and the goats eat the scrub. So they eat the scrub. So they'll eat the lower branches of the trees. They'll even eat poison oak if they're hungry enough. The debate's out whether it's ecologically or economically sound to use grazers, but the public loves it. It's an easy sell for the public, and it does absolutely reduce fine fuels and heavy loads. So, but you just got to weigh it in your community on whether or not it's both ecologically and economically sensible for your community, because it takes a lot of work and you got a guy on site 24/7. Those two. So then the other ways is herbicides. I'm on the greater campus, 1,100 acres, and the crew really like to use pre-emergent herbicides to control black mustard, which is so aggressive. It just comes out in January, February with thunderous growth. And so they use it with some level of success. So herbicides can have application in really urban environments. One of the best applications is to use it on resprouting shrubs. So you just took down a eucalyptus or another tree that crown sprouts. And you would just take that non-selective herbicide and throw it into the growing layer on the outside edges of the bark and allow that toxin to be absorbed into the plant and kill it. Coming back and chopping down the resprouts. Plowing and tilling is a little outdated because it kills the topsoil, it increases dust and particulates, and it absolutely degrades the soil health. But if you have really rich soil that's creating too much growth, tilling is actually really good at reducing that growth. So a good example was sometimes soils get really built up and acidic over time. And if you want to use a more native plant palette and you want it the soil not as rich to favor the plants and not as acidic, a little more alkaline. Tilling would do that. Tilling would reduce the amount of organics and actually drop the pH or drop the pH to make it a little more alkaline. Pulling, by far, the most effective, but really labor's the cost in landscapes. Labor is the biggest cost, and this really increases the labor costs, but it is by far the most effective. Scraping is where you just take something behind your truck and scrape off the first 2 or 3 inches of the soil, leaving a mineralization with nothing growing. And so scraping would be preferred around RVs, fire hydrants, propane tanks. Scrape because you don't want any growth at all. And then solarization. This is where we just lay down some black plastic and cook both the soil and the plants. And theoretically, we've gotten it hot enough where it kills the weed seeds that once we pull it back, it's ready for planting. You really need some hot weather and a long time to make this work, but it is effective with those 2 measures. Ways to handle green waste. When I was working in Marin County up in Northern California, biggest was too much biomass. What do we do with it? And so really, there's not too many secrets to do. Here's the way you can compost it. This is an inexpensive method, but it's actually sort of expensive in both time and space. It just takes a lot of time and space to create the compost good enough to be sending back out into the landscape. Burning is by far the quickest method and can be the least expensive, but it's probably outlawed up in Big Bear during some times. I would like to point out, though, that there are portable generators. They're not very efficient. 5 to 10% of the available energy gets turned into electricity, but they rapidly reduce green waste on hand. The energy that they generate, the electricity, can be plugged back into the system. So your green waste is actually having a benefit to the energy supply. And they run at such high degrees that the damaging pollutants, they actually are way less damaging than an open fire because they run at such hot degrees, they knock off all those hydrocarbons. So that's a really good way. And you're seeing that now in Butte County and Mendocino County. They're using these portable generators now to reduce the amount of green waste in fire country. And then bioutilization. There are all kinds of things that we can make with our green waste. So the picture on the bottom right is Angel City Lumber. They take down trees and make boutique lumber products or boutique lumber, and then sell them to a variety of places throughout LA. So we can make products, we can make mulch, and we can even turn it into energy, as I already talked. And there's a variety of energy sources, from biogas to direct combustion that the biomass can be turned into. So anyway, these are the 3 primary ways. There's every community has to negotiate how they're going to handle their green waste. And then working with nature. This is really important now. California, the world has experienced its 6th mass extinction. The very first mass extinction was done by plants. I just wanted to know we're not the first species to cause a mass extinction. Plants caused the very first one, but it's horrifying to see the changes in California. When I was a kid, we had trout and abalone and marlin off our coast, and those are all gone, just gone. And so it's been tragic to watch from my perspective. And there's ways we can work in fire country that reduce some of the impacts. So some of the key strategies here are timing, the use of herbicides, dead stuff, and then leave islands. Now, timing by far is the most critical of all those. And it really helps to know what species you're protecting before determining what timing. But if you were just going to be general and say, I'm going to protect birds, well, then you'd want to do it in their off season. So if you can clear any kind of land in February, March, February and March, well before they have mated and nested, you've got a jump start. But if you can't, and you have to wait till April or May or June to do your clearing, you're really going to disrupt the generalized mating season of birds. And so maybe for Big Bear residents, you actually maybe want to wait for massive clearing projects until July after those chicks have hatched and are out into the environment. But it really depends on your species. That just needs a little investigation. Herbicides, as a rule, just spraying herbicides on a landscape doesn't help at all. Supple vegetation is far easier to work with than dead vegetation. So again, I think herbicides application in the environment is strictly to stop those resprouting shrubs or trees by using a non-selective herbicide or using some type of pre-emergent, which has 50%, 60% success rates. And then leave a little dead stuff. Dead stuff is so important. Now you can't do that in the first 70 feet. That's actually against the law. But once you get into 71 feet out into zone 3, it is really beneficial for the local wildlife. It provides nesting material, it provides food, it provides habitat. It is vital for ecological functioning. And then leave islands. This was started by Shelter Belt after the Oakland-Berkeley fire in Oakland-Berkeley in 1992. 1991, sorry. A guy just started doing fire mitigation work for biological diversity, and he created this idea of shelter belts. And he just has small little islands that are about 10 feet in circumference, and they're about 30 feet from another island. And during your clearing, the critters have some place to run to. And then once you've cleared, now they can repopulate that area. And then after so many years, those islands get knocked down and new islands are grown. And so it's a good way to manage to avoid complete destruction. And then reasons for low compliance. This is important. I'm not too sure what I'm doing on time. But California, I've been at this now since 1994, and without regulatory compliance checkers, mainly the fire department going out there and giving weed abatement notices, voluntary compliance with state fire code is dismal, 8 to 30%, and 30% and it's kind of rare. And mostly you'll see that with community associations. And it's just absolutely dismal. And when I first started this in the 1990s, I just couldn't figure it out. I lived in a community that was incredibly fire resistant. It was wealthy. Everybody in my little valley knew about the danger of fire, but really we weren't doing anything about it. And so I started interviewing psychiatrists and evolutionary biologists to find out what is going on. Why can't we get over this hurdle? And here's what I came up with. One, it is emotionally expensive to go out there and harm our wild areas. Most people that live out in rural areas and in the woods just really love nature. They have a deep respect for it. And to go out there and ask them to cause harm can cause them physical harm and discomfort. And so there's this really emotional expense about weed whacking, a massive oaks or toyons that are harboring a massive wrens or other birds. So there's this real cost. And then it's financially expensive. And if you've got an acre or more, that's $3,000 a year. You're looking at mowing costs, weed whacking costs, and that's not counting the tree trimming and the dead branch removals and stuff. So, you could be looking at thousands of dollars a year to meet fire code. Another reason too, and I found this out in Northern California, is that it can be socially expensive. So in my valley, I was the big fire guy and I was going to save the world. This was in the 1990s. And so I got a bunch of work on this one street, and all I was doing was taking out the dead stuff of these trees, but it was completely changing the look of the environment because the dead stuff had accumulated for years and years. And boy, were those neighbors pissed off at me. They would drive by and give me the finger and yell at me. It was telling me, you Southern Californians hate trees, la da da. I wasn't removing any trees. But the point is, though, there's this ethic. There's this real thing where people have this shared idea of what their neighborhood's ecology should be like. And then lastly, it's how people process risk. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question here, but have any of you driven while talking on your cell phone? Probably most of us have, and we know it's not only illegal, but it greatly endangers your life and those around you. And yet we do it anyway, and it's how we're wired. It's actually very normal and natural for us to do that. And here's why. Fire danger, like driving, is an ever-present risk, ever-present danger. And so we can know about it and we think, oh yeah, that's terrible. I got to act on that. But it's so ever present that after a while, it fades into the background for more pressing emergencies. We have to get our kids to school. I need to get that promotion at job, or my deck is falling down. And so we have all these other emergencies that are constantly getting in front of these ever present emergencies. And that's kind of mostly explains why compliance is low, because we are a very busy society and have so many other emergencies ahead of us. So if people, I know Sierra works with a lot of fire agents, we want to create a community that's fire safe. We're going to have to really address all of this, come up with campaigns that are sympathetic to the emotional and social expense of doing this work, and provide maybe chipper days or reduce the financial stress a little bit. And then we just need to keep it in people's foreheads. This is danger and we need to act on it. So, and defensible space works. Not only does it work from an economic point of view and a community point of view, but from an ecological point of view. On average, the average home takes about 60 new trees to build the new home. And that's along with the finite resources and all this other stuff. So maintaining our communities is the environmental right choice. So the conclusion, hope I'm doing good. So just in review, zones 2 and 3, manage those fuel tanks and those RVs. Those are your big liabilities. Train people on fire use. Handling green waste, there's no secret. And we're going to have to deal with this in every densely wooded community. Working with nature, there's things that we can do to reduce the impacts of being fire in our landscapes. And lastly, the reasons for low compliance. We all need to acknowledge that we're human, that we have failability, and that we just need strategies to adapt to being human. So where are we going? Just where are we going? And my idea of a healthy 22nd century California is that we would develop communities that would allow wild areas, Yosemite and the federal and state land beyond your urban core up there, to naturally burn as it has for tens of thousands of years. We cannot take fire out of that area. So let it be, let it have those areas. Let all the dangerous stuff have those areas. Let the cougars, the bears, the wasps, the poison oak, the landslides, the flooding, all that is out there. And then we have these other areas where human concern outweighs all else, human concern and well-being. And this is where we are fire. We're the flood station. And we create communities that create healthy, happy humans. So that's my vision for 22nd century. And this is where my work is trying to go, is let nature have it. Let's stop that mass extinction out there. And then let's create these oases for humans at least 100 feet around all our community assets. And with that, thank you so much for inviting me back into your community and letting me give this presentation and talk my silly head off. I appreciate all of you, and I hope we run into each other again.
Great. Thank you, Doug. So it looks like right now we do have one question from Lisa. She says, I have difficulty applying the zone theory as I have a relatively small lot, as do neighbors close by. I also have some large, mature Jeffrey pine pretty close to the house. Limbs are pretty far off the ground that I don't want to cut down. What should someone like me do?
Okay, first and foremost, go back to that first presentation I gave. I had 3 slides on strategies for small lots. So that's 1, making multiple ways off. Two, making sure that your house is fire hardened, that it can withstand those firebrands that may be raining down from the Jeffrey pine. You were really smart in limbing up that Jeffrey pine. Not only is it law, but it really will save your structure. If you can, get somebody up in those trees to knock down that dead stuff. So when those firebrands come flying in, your Jeffrey pine doesn't ignite. And really just make sure that there's none of that ignitable material on your property, and you might survive if you and your neighbors can create that low ignitable landscape. That was a really good question. So go back to that first presentation 2 months ago. It would really help.
And then we do have another question from Dana McCoy. She says, can you address wood fences and making those fire safe?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Wood can be fire safe. Absolutely. And all it takes is just treatment. So wood is only a liability if it's got slivers or crevices for these firebrands to attach to and ignite. So if you can create a fence where the firebrands hit, drop, and do not ignite anything below it, then you're fine. So it's just good treatment. So once every two to 3 years, you're quickly power washing it, knocking off the splinters, and then quickly painting it with any kind of treatment to fill those gaps, to make sure those firebrands don't have anything to stick to. And then importantly, just mow that flammable vegetation 2 feet on either side so there's no direct flames igniting it. Wood only has a life. I don't know how long it lasts up there in a temperate environment, but down here, a wood fence would only last 8 to 12 years. So, at some point, it's just going to need replacement. And you may want to think about corrugated metal, which Sierra had brought up last time. And it's just a fantastic long-term, low-maintenance alternative to wood. And it's a little better sound barrier too, I'd bet. Great question, Dana.
Sierra has a question. Do you want to speak out loud or you want me to read it?
Sure, I could speak it out loud. I was just trying to be nice. Before I forget everything. Are electrical mowers and blowers and all of that kind of equipment safer than gas powered when it comes to starting fires?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You still have the risk of anything spinning, catching a rock and causing a spark. So that's ever present, but you do not have the combustion. You don't have the combustion engine and an explosion. And so that engine is designed to capture that explosion and make sure it doesn't get up. So not only that, but the electrical stuff doesn't get as hot as the combustion engine stuff. You don't have the exhaust problems. Yes, Sierra, do you have any rebates for that?
We don't, but the Air Quality Management District does. So if anybody is interested in electric, yeah, check with the Southern California Air Quality Management District, and they do have rebates for those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we don't have electric. I haven't used electric weed whackers yet, but I hope to. Yeah, that would be interesting to find out how efficient they are. And I bet it's just easier on your ears.
Yeah. And then what about artificial turf was one of the other questions I had. Is that flammable or is it safer? Is there anything that people that have artificial turf need to be concerned about? Do you know?
Yeah, I do know. Most artificial turf is vinyl, and vinyl just oozes. So if you exposed it to intense heat and damage, it just oozes. Now you really need to check the plastics. And Sierra, if you want, I can send you my plastic cheat sheet, and it just says which plastics are flammable and not. So you really need to check on which type of plastic they made your turf on. You may also want to consult with the city of Malibu, because Malibu has outlawed artificial turf in high fire hazard areas. And I never knew the reason. I don't know why they did that. And so maybe they know something I don't know, but from the industry, the artificial turf industry, if it's vinyl, you're good to go. It's just going to melt and ooze and not really produce much of a flame. But if it's something different, nylon, it could actually be inflamed. So,
Lauren, I'll let you read that next one. I know we have another question.
That was a really good one.
So Dana asks, how much fire danger from native shrubs such as rabbit brush, Artemisia, I'm bad at those kind of names,
Oh, you nailed it. That's
etc.
good.
And is irrigation helpful?
Yes. So the lotus, the deer brush, I think that's the one you're talking about in Artemisia. There's a lot of different varieties of Artemisia. Dana, it really depends on the maintenance. So if they don't have those fine fuels, they could be good to go. If again, if you saw last month's presentation, I showed you a picture of a juniper 15 feet away from a burnt house. And the only reason it survived, it's on everybody's hit list. The only reason it survived is because it was in good shape and it was irrigated. So yes, it would absolutely help. Now, I will tell you though, if you over irrigate lotus or Artemisia, you will shorten their life. So it's a good way to hype them out. It's like steroids for some of our native plants, and it just shortens their life. So you really want to be a little sparing with the water, maybe once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on the weather conditions. But I think you can maintain both those plants to be fairly fire resistant, if not fire retardant. Yeah.
Then I had another question. This is probably a little oddball, but when it comes to those fuel tanks, any idea like who moves those? Would it be the company that you rent it from, or do you hire somebody? Because I have one and it was on our property when we moved here, and it is like 20 feet from my house. So I don't know like how I would even go about getting that moved.
Yeah, so you may need a PE, an engineer on that one for the pad. Maybe the city folks. Are you county up there?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you may not need a PE, maybe a C27, because it's really, yeah, C27 can move gas lines, no problem. But it just may need a permit to be pulled from the county, which may need then the PE, an engineer, to sign off on the concrete pad that they're going to pour and the new trench line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how I'd approach it. But I think a C27 can pull that off.
And Chardell, I don't know if you're, at rapt attention, but Chardell works for the fire department. I know that she's on the call today. If she had anything to add regarding the flamers or anything else that was mentioned, because I know you said, like, I'm pretty positive I looked it up before that those are illegal here.
Okay.
And then and I think they're illegal year round, as far as I know. I could be wrong on that. And then I was also just curious because I think that you mentioned it's rather than limb up to isolate the trees. Is that kind of a new way of thinking, or where did that come from? Because yeah, limbing up is still very much promoted in our communities, and I still see it all over the place on the wildfire and the, fire community protection sites. And I'm just kind of curious where that came from.
Okay, I'll tell you where that came from. That's a really good question. It highlights 2 points here. First, firescaping is all gray, right? We need our fire protecting landscapes to work for a month of the year, but these landscapes have to work 12 months of the year. So there's this big gray area that sometimes these two things are in conflict. And the reason this limbing up came up is when I was working for Fire Safe Marin in the 1990s, we were prescribing limbing up, limbing up, limbing up. In 1996, we had this horrendous wind year. And it kited all the trees, snapped them right in half, from the Golden Gate Park to Sausalito to Corte Madera to Mount Tam. It just leveled any tree except those with the lower branches. So after that, Fire Safe and we were all, horticulturally, limbing up is horticulture. From a fire point of view, it sure makes a lot of sense, but from a horticultural point of view, it made no sense at all. And so you can actually look up any botany manual. No botany manual would actually encourage limbing up, because we know there's growth suppressing hormones at the end of the stems. And if you remove those stems, it causes the plants to shoot up. And you can do it with your own plant. You can do it with your tomato plant. You can do it with your philodendron. And so, yeah.
So not at all, or like a couple feet off the ground, or just no limbing at all? Okay.
So this is it. This is how I limb my trees now. When 50% or less of the branch is green, it's dying back and it's time to limb up. But if that whole branch is green, it means that trunk is rapidly growing to that branch. And that's the branch you don't want to limb up. So a young tree, you would never limb up. Any kind of branch that is full of growth, you would never want to remove. But once that growth gets restricted, yeah, it's the plant's telling you it's going to shed that branch. Right.
And yeah, Chardell did confirm no flame type equipment allowed.
And,
Yeah, maybe we should have had her edit this one, huh? Sorry, Chardell.
Sierra, you did bring up something else as well. You provided that link for September 17th, the chipping program. So that is something to definitely take note if you are here in Big Bear, to make use of that program. And maybe Chardell might have more information on that as well. I'm not sure if that's in her field house there. And then I'm trying to see if we have any other questions. Feel free to raise your hand.
Well, I'm just curious is how many people got a weed abatement notice? Does a lot of people get one of those?
Any raise of hands? Anyone willing to?
I actually got one, but it had a picture of somebody else's house on it. And so I contacted the county and I was like, so wait, is this for me or is this for somebody else? Because I could see their address on the picture and they were like, our mistake, that's somebody else. We're going to send it to.
That is a kooky mistake. Wow. He was having an off day. They were having an off day.
For the most part, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that they didn't get one this year. So maybe your classes have helped us, Douglas.
Oh, the guy in charge of the notice to Sierra was in charge of the abatement. Yeah. Okay, there's going to be a job opening coming up.
So do we have any last minute questions? Not seeing any. Chardell does say that the Mountain Rim Fire Safe Council website has more information on the chipping program if you want to take advantage of that. And since I'm not seeing any other questions, let's see. If you have any questions after class, just make sure that you can email us at conservation@bblwp.com, and I will throw those questions Douglas's way, or try to answer them ourselves. Also, just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, make sure to register for our last webinar with Laura Allen, and you can learn how to save trees during drought. So that will be a good one to wrap up our summer series.
Did you want me to send you that plastic cheat sheet?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, I'll do that as soon as we, yep, got it.
So if anyone wants that information, we'll have that on hand as well. And then due to the current, also just invite your friends and spread the word, let them know that we do still have one last webinar to join in. And lastly, just a big thank you to Douglas for sharing your expertise this summer and crafting it, especially for Big Bear. We really appreciate all your knowledge and time. And if you've missed any classes, want to rewatch them, make sure to check out YouTube at Big Bear Waters. Type it in the search engine. You should be able to find a playlist of all the videos so far. With that, wishing everyone a great rest of your week. Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, courageous people. Thank you, Sierra. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Dana. That was nice.